Okay, so welcome everyone to today's session of Finance Unplugged. Today we have a guest with us who has a wide range of experience in the finance industry, Natraj Korgaonkar. Please, sir, welcome to the session. And today's agenda will be around discussing your career journey in banking and finance. And we aim to basically use your experience to inspire the next generation to build a successful career. So please feel free to share, anything and everything that you wish is important for the community of aspirants, for the professionals, and um, we can just take it from here.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Ripul, and thank you, Riskin team. Hello, everyone. My name is Natraj Korgaonkar. I'm an executive director currently at an MNC, and I've been in the industry for almost 19 plus years. And I started my career way back in 2006. Again, throughout this 19 years, I've been into different MNCs, and in different roles. My first role was a part of the private banking operations in Mumbai. In that company, I spent about 5 years. I did different roles, starting from GLRS and reconciliations and SOX audits, and then I moved into revenue accounting, which is fee billing for the private banking clients. And then after a stint of about 5 years, then I moved at another MNC where I was doing financial planning and analysis for about a year and a half. And then I had also a career break for about a year and 3 months, and then again rejoined that same MNC for another year and a half for where I was doing management reporting, financial planning reporting. And then from there, I changed cities. And from Mumbai, I came to Bangalore, where I joined a European MNC bank. In this role, this was the first time I started into risk, where my role was more on the treasury risk for the wholesale loans department. I spent about close to a year in that bank, and then again rejoined another US MNC bank, where I got deeply involved in market risk, credit risk, and a bit of risk appetite recording and management. And in the last 5 years, I've been with another US MNC bank, where I've purely focused on various operational risk and overall risk management framework. So that's been my career journey, and I'm happy to kind of share more thoughts around what I've done and engage in this conversation.
Thank you so much. So, that's a great career journey. And I believe that there are some of the questions that we often get from the community members that you'll be able to answer and provide a perspective that they might not find anywhere else. My first question to you here is, so when you transition to your role in risk, right? What kind of changes did you see in that role compared to your previous roles? What were the challenges that you had to perhaps overcome? And what really, inspired you to pursue within risk? And then your next role was also in market risk. And now you are in operational risk. So just want to kind of, understand that.
Sure. I think one of the things is, when I started my career in the private banking operations, there the knowledge and the expertise or skills required were to get the executions completed. When I say executions, the transactions, should be completed within time, without error, and we used to perform a lot of controls to mitigate the risk inherent within that specific transaction or the processes that we manage. However, when I transitioned from operations to a finance role and finance to risk, the delta between these three different verticals is that in one you require business process knowledge, more in detail, to understand what steps should be done after point A to point B, point B to point C. Like how, let's say, an example, if I have to prepare a report, how should I prepare the report? What are the attributes that should be excluded? What are the attributes to be included? And how do I verify that my, let's say, total of transaction matches to what's there in the ledger? Right. So these are operational steps, and therefore the focus was purely on that. But when I moved from operations to finance, the pure differentiation was for us to understand what are the implications, let's say, of interest on a particular balance. How do we plan, forecast for the next 6 months, 10 months? How do we factor in changes in the cost? So it's purely operational again, but more based on uh, financial background, understanding of balance sheet. How does various financial items play a role in all of these items? And likewise, when I move from finance into treasury risk and market risk subsequently, I think having an experience in operations and finance helped me a lot because when we look at risk, risk has various metrics that are measured, and those measurements allow us to manage these risks efficiently or effectively, right? The mitigation of these risks are also determined based on what are the boundaries set for each of these metrics. Therefore, the transition from understanding how business processes and finance impact a risk metric was became one of my guiding stones to understand, hey, how is this risk metric getting calculated, and when there is a breach, when there is a limit cross, how is that impacting the overall financials of that particular bank, and therefore let's say shareholder value, stock prices, and so on and so forth. So in a long story short, as long as you are able to understand uh, the industry, the processes, and the implications of these risk metrics, or how your role is involved to mitigate these risks, the transition would be fairly simple. But at the same time, the challenges that come along with it is one needs to be, adept in understanding what these metrics are, how they play a role in overall risk management, how do they impact a risk appetite of a business or an enterprise, and what are the controls in place. So those are, I wouldn't say pure technical, but yeah, they are fundamental to the risk management construct, and therefore you need to switch from a finance or operations hat to a risk management hat and try to see it from that lens.
Understood. So, interestingly, like you mentioned that when you transitioned, there were certain areas where, your previous experience really helped you, right? And there
Right.
are challenges too. My question is that now imagine if someone is directly starting their career within risk and they don't have, the experiences that you have had, similar experiences. Do you think in today's day and age it will be easier for them to to adjust, or they'll face some challenges and how to overcome those? Because there are two pathways. One, you are basically, you have certain education, you have perhaps maybe FRM or CFA, and then you start your career. Or you are someone who has worked in BFSI but you have not directly worked in risk, like you mentioned, right? And then you transition to risk. How do you feel, in your experience, that these two pathways impact once you actually get started in risk?
Right. So, see, someone who's fairly new versus someone who has some experience in different domains and now starting into risk, the difference is just one step. Honestly, let's simplify. The difference is just one step. As long as anybody gets into a new role, okay, that person is just one step behind the person who's in the same role or has similar experience. There's not much of a difference. But that one step can become 100 steps if the person does not take adequate responsibilities to upskill or upgrade their knowledge for that particular role. In a simplified example, Someone who's just completed, let's say, an FRM may have a technical, educational, foundational knowledge, but to translate that into a workplace where the role of a person, let's say, is to do control testing, which involves identifying the risk, understanding how the control mitigates the risk, right? That that operational part might be fairly simple, but if there are new nuances that come into that particular, let's say, control or that process, which is unnoticed, and that significantly amplifies the risk, and the person who's testing that control is not able to understand these small nitty-gritties, that may land that particular control in a big challenge, right? So this one step, it becomes tenfold if you're not educating yourself around the business as well as the data architecture. So in a very simplified way, anybody who gets into risk needs to understand four main areas of that person's job. One is business and processes. Second is systems and applications. Third is the data architecture, right? And then the fourth element will be where is that particular risk activity or the role of that person impacting these areas, so that that person is able to understand better. So in a let's double click on this. Let's say if there is somebody who joins a simple risk management team where a lot of these teams do RCS, which is a risk control self-assessment, and the outcome of RCS is generally with control testing. You test the controls to see if the control mitigates the risk, right? Now, when a person is in that specific role, one need to understand what are the business and the processes. So, in which business are we testing these controls? Is this business related to wealth and investment management? Whether this business is related to commercial real estate or commercial banking or investment banking or simple consumer banking accounts management, right? So we understand the business. Within the business, what are the products and services that I'm catering? So if I'm looking at something which is commercial backed securities, right, or sorry, mortgage backed securities or commercial lending, which could be term loans or bullet loans or multiple types of loans and services that corporates get. Or if the person is into a pure banking product where they are dealing with loans and deposits at a consumer level. So we need to understand what are the products and services within that specific business in which the role is. Now, once we know the products and services, try to identify the data architecture. Where is the data coming from and where is the data flowing to? Right. So you can have an entire SIPOC or a bird's view of the process, control, input, output, and SIPOC, right? And supplier, input, process, output, control, right? So you have that bird's eye view, and then you're able to understand, okay, this is the flow of information in this specific process, and my control lies at this specific point. So now I have a better view of what I'm supposed to check and how that applies in that data architecture for those applications in that particular product and services within that business. If we're able to identify this, then irrespective whether you are in a risk role or a finance role or an operations role, I think you are termed for success. And all that you have to do then is understand your procedures, your policies, and guidelines that apply to that particular step or procedure, and then follow through with your own application of learning from prior certification or prior roles. I think that is what will help anybody into any role.
Understood. Okay. So, thank you for explaining that. That was a really nice description. And, I have a few follow-up questions there. So, as I understood, right? So, there is a lot of data. You need to make sense of the data to make decisions.
Right.
While you also need to keep in mind the regulations. So, study the documentations and everything else, and then you need to basically present what should be the actionables, right? My
Right.
question is, as the industry is evolving, what kind of tools are now being used to make sense of the data? For example, there's Excel, there's Python, there's SAS, there's SQL. And how do you see these tools evolving in today's day and age? What was used in the past? Maybe Excel was the only tool used in the past. And where do you see this trend going? Because I believe that time efficiency is one thing, and when you are making sense of the data set, the in the the better you are able to utilize your time, the more valuable you might be to your team, right? So
Right.
what kind of tools you should master for that?
Okay. So I'll be honest, there isn't a particular answer to this question, right? You depending upon a person's role, the tools may vary, right? I know some folks who currently have mastered SaaS, but the enterprise is moving from SaaS into more, let's say, a Google Cloud platform, GCP, right? And therefore, the technical knowledge of SaaS is important, but also of GCP, right? But in another area, right, the starting point itself is GCP. So probably there are people who are not even using SaaS. So it all varies depending upon the role. But in today's scenario, uh, and I'm going to just make a small analog, right? Let's say 50, 70 years back, even a 7th standard pass or a 10th standard pass was sufficient to kind of get a job. Now people are looking at MBA as a very basic, generic certifications or courses, but they are also looking at more skill-based, which is like FRM or CFA. Likewise, likewise, most of these applications, such as running an Excel or Access database, are very generic. However, Microsoft has embedded Excel or uplifted Excel and other applications to a different level today. So if somebody wants to literally understand Excel, there are different different areas or avenues within Excel itself. There's Power Automate, right? There's Power Query. All of these, so entire Microsoft 360 will integrate with each other and help to understand the usage of these applications, right? So my suggestion is that every industry today uses a lot of Microsoft, so heavily invest yourself into understanding not just Excel but also Power Automate, Power Query, Power BI, which is a dashboarding tool, right? For you to understand the how analytics are presented in a dashboard or a report format. And then there are other querying tools like SQL, Python. I think there is there are SQL, Python, SAS, right? These will help you understand how you can use various data sets or tables and data infrastructure, large amount of data to kind of query and build a particular report or an outcome. And then you also have a lot of AI tools today, like how does prompt work in various AI platforms. I think those will also be helpful. But the challenge is everything that we learn today is going to be out of context in a few years. So if we stick to just what we learn today, then I think we're doomed for the the big day in future. So I think most important is to kind of continuously learn what's new in the market, and also learn from your peers and your seniors because they will know what's happening in the industry when they connect with other industry experts. So that's what I feel about it.
Understood. Thank you so much. So, you mentioned that learn from your seniors, right? So, for example, a person has just started his career, is learning all these tools, working on a project, and then becomes interested in a similar field. For example, someone is working in credit risk and, starts to develop an interest in market risk as well, right? And
Right.
that's something that really happens with people, with once they have half a decade of experience. So now, my question is how they should be approaching building their expertise for a long and successful career. Because when someone is at your stage, having an experience in various domains really helps, right? So for someone, let's take an example. For someone who is has been in a role in a given risk function, for example credit risk, and now also wants to move to market risk, how would you suggest they make this transition? Or they should, or would you say they should become master of one rather than thinking of transitioning? How have you seen people approach this while thinking of a career, not just next 5 years down the line, but next 15 or 20 years down the line?
Sure. So there is this something that I learned in through various mentors and seniors in the industry. It's called a T-shaped skill set. Okay, so a T-shaped skill set is, let's say someone like me. Okay, I started with treasury risk, then I added market risk, then I added credit risk, and now a bit of climate risk in the middle, and now operational risk. But I've spent, out of the 10 years, I spent approximately 5.5 years to 6 years closely in just operational risk. So it's like a T, right? I've been across various risk stripes, but I've gone more deeper into operational risk. Nowadays, I hear a trend which is called a diamond shape. So you actually go, horizontal across various risk stripes. You go little deep into it, but then you will have one, like the one T, but on the other side, it's like a V, right? So you look at market risk for market risk reporting, market risk limits management, market risk back testing, and so on. So you build an expertise in market risk and up to a particular area, then you go into operational risk. You go more deeper into operational risk. Then you look at credit risk. You may only look at loss given default and a couple of other metrics and how we're going to manage this credit risk. And then you look at liquidity risk or treasury risk and so on and so forth. So those are some of the terms that I hear, but in a very, very, very basic thing, right? Whatever role you get into, whatever role you are at today, go at the end of it. And there is, if you look at it technically, there's no end, but try to understand the same four principles or four areas, which is your business, your products and services, your data architecture, and your systems, along with your current role. If you're able to kind of go, understand this and use this framework in any role, then you start to go deeper into it, and you are able to build fungible skills that then allows you to move from market risk to credit risk. What I mean by fungible risk skills is, I do not learn just what is operational risk. I've built a system within myself that, hey, any role that I go into, I need to know these four areas thoroughly. I need to understand what business I'm going to be part of, what are the products and services within that, what are the data architecture and applications that is used, and what kind of policy procedures are applicable for that role. And then look at that more in detail. Start looking at every single line to understand, okay, how is this applying in your work? And that's how you go deeper. And when I want to transition it from, let's say, an operational risk into credit risk or probably interest rate risk or geopolitical risk tomorrow, I know I can do it because I have a framework in my mind, the way I operate, the way I run my day-to-day affairs. I'm able to transition myself from my particular role into a different role only because I'm going to carry this framework. And this allows me to go deeper into any single role that I may take up in the future.
Okay. Okay. Understood. So, in regards to this, one of the questions, that we often get from professionals, and we see that, this is something that many people think about. So we know that, coding is one of the key skill sets that many people are good at, many people, naturally enjoy. But then, there are also people who would rather not, right? So here's my question. In today's day and age, if someone really wants to focus on the concepts on and really being able to solve the problems in whichever field they become an expert in, are there, would you say that they should rather pick A or B or C, for example, credit rather than market or treasury, if they prefer to do coding or they don't prefer to do coding? Or would you say that in today's reality that we live in, everyone should learn coding?
Okay. Um, here's the thing, okay? And I'm going to answer this question again with a little bit of history. If we go back to the period when our grandfathers were working, like I'm 40, okay, so a point in time between, let's say, 1920s to 1960s, right? What was required was people were able to write, okay, that was the minimal, right? Uh, then came an age of, let's say, our parents between 1970s to 2010. For them, the transition was not just bookkeeping or record management, but also from that to computers. And let's say the early 2000s, it was on using mobiles. And today's generation, they started with mobile already, and they've got iPads and laptops at their home. They will kind of transition into a uh, higher intelligent applications or hardwares, probably in their palms or in their homes. So the reason of these transitions is not because you have these new technologies that are coming up, but it's also the adoption of these new technologies. So now to answer your question on coding, technologies, because of adoption and because of the way it's spread across the globe so fast, coding and technology will go hand in hand. And therefore, there will be a point where a person doesn't have to know how to code, but each one of us will have widgets that will allow us to use what's already been coded to execute the same transaction and in a faster and better way. And I'll give you a simplified way again from history. Earlier, people used to write letters. From letters, we moved to emails. Now, again, the concept it was still the same. I want to send a message from person A to person B. The medium changed from letters to emails. Now, we don't have to know how to code an HTML page so that I could send an email, right? It's the same analog that's going to be used on forward. We may not need to know how to code, but we should know how to use those various widgets that are available in an application that execute the same transaction that we would have done using a code. So, because of let's say democratization of technology, technology is available with everybody. Even a 80-year old can today build apps without coding, right? So as a 6-year-old or 8-year-old person, and therefore coding may not be necessary unless There's somebody who's actually focusing on building LLM models and different models where that person wants to probably build something from the scratch, and that may need some type of coding experience. And for risk management in that specific area, then that person may need to know how these codes were created for better risk management of those codes and applications. So that's where probably codes may be more required. But from a regular, let's say, market risk, credit risk, or treasury risk, we may get to a position where, unless that role is requiring to build applications or uh, you know uh, development of those applications, or tech support of those applications, coding may not be 100% necessary. It may be just something good to know or really important to know for you to manage risk a little better.
Understood. That's actually one of the nicest explanations that I have heard about the evolution of how we should be utilizing the codes. And my question, my one of my questions here, based on my interaction with a few of the people, who come from, let's say, credit underwriting, or let's say working in banking, but not really exposed to models. Maybe working, at a retail bank, right? And after 15 or 20 years, they now feel that they should go into the core functions of modeling, maybe within credit risk, maybe within market risk. And it's natural to think that maybe I have come too far in one direction. Will I be a successful person in the other direction, where people are actually getting a head start? Someone who is just graduating from college, doing an FRM and getting started. What's your advice to people on such a career journey path? And coding is one of the things that also comes into play over there, right? So how they should be smartly approaching this kind of a career change, in your opinion?
Sure. So somebody who's worked on underwriting and now wants to look at credit modeling, I think um, a really strong business knowledge is something that they will be able to kind of use in credit modeling space, right? They spend a lot of years to understand different scenarios, understand which customer we should be blending and which customer we shouldn't be. They understand a good amount of data that's available in that particular domain. So I think they've already crossed 70-80% of what is required in modeling, right? Now, what's important is, would a person like this, and again, I'm now specific to that a person who's from underwriting and wants to get into modeling, would that person really need to code? The answer is no. Would that person really need to know how to code? The answer is no. Would that person really need to understand how the code is working? The answer is definitely yes, right? So if I'm in that shoe and I'm moving from underwriting and my aspiration is to get into some sort of a modeling type role, I would get into model validation role, which is a difference. I'm not creating a model, I'm validating the efficacy of that model, the efficiency of that model, right? And these aspects require very few, let's say, or rather, major requirement for this is to understand the business, the product that we are modeling for, what kind of customer base, which location we are going to provide these details. And all of this experience is gained in the underwriting space. So you understand the data, you understand, okay, which area, what type of customer segments we're looking at. And all that I'm using with the models is the same data. I'm using this analytical tool to say, can I lend X money to Natraj, to Ripul, to person A, to person B? What is my probability of loss? How much I am able to recover by when, and all of that. So I'm going to study the same elements that I do when I'm doing an underwriting. But here in modeling, I'm just doing it across segments of customers. And therefore, I will use common parameters to say, okay, these are the segment of customers which I know there's a lesser probability of loss and we can, recover the money, we can make X amount of profit. And therefore, for me to study this specific segment, I will need to know how the code was applied to use, how the code was applied in that particular data to kind of extract the data and then study it to determine my next step. So model validation, and there's a very simplified way of saying there are various numerous complexities that get involved in it. So a person from underwriting can start into model validation, and once that person has been comfortable 3 to 5 years in model validation, probably can explore uh, model building, because by then that person knows how the codes are were created to bring or generate those models, understand the usage of models and all of that, and then start and parallelly upskill with coding. So you don't have to know how to code on day zero. When you get into a model validation, you learn in the first 2 years and then build coding in the next 3 years while you continue to understand the domain a little better. And that's how you can move into building models as well over the next 3 to 5 years.
Understood. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. I am sure this is going to be really beneficial to the audience who's watching right now. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. If you are a community member, my DMs are already always open. Please feel free to send me a question, and we can even, ask Natraj to maybe answer any of the follow-up questions also based on what you have just told. So one of the questions which I want to ask is also, you mentioned that information going from person A to B, it has evolved from letters to emails, right? And
Yeah.
from emails to now, we are going, in a future where things might be even more exciting, right? So, how important is communication? My first question: when you are working in a risk function or in wider finance functions also, and if you are someone who doesn't really like communicating that much, maybe some people like working in silos, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of roles they should focus on? There's model validation, there is development. You are could be an analyst, or you could be going on the operation side. Do you think that, and this is something that that's a preference, some people like talking to a lot variety of people from a variety of experiences, utilizing that in solving their own problems, the problem sets that they're working on, while some others might say that, I'm more comfortable if you give me a problem statement and I will work on it. And, I will then provide the, the analysis or the output. Do you think that this really matters in the kind of role that you pick once you get started or once you, progress in your career?
Here's my personal opinion on this. First, communicate. When I say communication, okay, nobody in this world today can stay without communicating with anybody else, let alone staying in a silo. Right, that's one. Two, person's preferences, like a person is introvert or an extrovert, does not impact any role. This is my personal view, right? I don't think that an introvert is not good in sales or an extrovert is really, really good in sitting in one place and just, within a cubicle and coding, right? That is not even the case, right? I think people just need to carry themselves to work or into their role. You carry your own personality, you carry your own charisma, you carry the way you uh, work, your work ethics, right? That's going to be important. Being yourself, the natural you, is going to be critical. This may sound again, more like a leadership or a motivational speech, but it isn't. Fundamentals of work do not change. Fundamentals are we are going to deal with people irrespective of how you are. Now, I can choose to communicate with a Ripple only for my work, purely, transactional, or I can choose to hang out with you for a coffee after work and, even discuss. So that should not decide what role I should get in. I know some of my folks, my peers and my really good friends, they're they're highly extrovert and they are into sales. And then there are others who are highly extrovert and they like to kind of sit in the cubicle and work. Right? It doesn't matter. There are introverts who are really good into public speaking. They are also motivational speakers. And then there are folks in the same area who are working in they're running their own stores and the old business models, right? So it doesn't matter what kind of character or character is not a right word, but let's say what kind of nature you have, right? As long as you carry your own strong work ethics, you carry being your 100% at the role at the work that you are. I think that's the key. And of course, along with that becomes the skill sets. Your skill sets are not dependent on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, or whether you like to speak to people or you don't like to speak to people. You can always show or demonstrate your skills through your work, and that's going to be critical. So that's where I would kind of answer this question.
Yeah, I think that answers this question. So I guess, like, what you are saying is that focus on the job and developing the skills. And this is something that really shouldn't impact you once you get started.
Ab-
And everyone faces challenges, but there are ways to overcome them, like you said, right? There are introverts who are great at sales and extroverts sitting in a cubicle. So that explains it. Okay. So, so far we've had such a great discussion, and, I have a few more questions,
Sure.
and I would like to, address them. But before we kind of, go into those questions, so far we have learned about, how a person should be approaching building a career in risk, what kind of skills are required based on their background, how they should be making transitions in various roles. My next question is for students, who are, maybe doing engineering, maybe doing BCom, BBA, and, they're in the second or third year, for example, and they just learned about the awesome field of finance and risk, right? There are consulting firms, there are banks. What is your advice to the next generation in terms of the kind of skills, the kind of knowledge, and the kind of initiatives they should be taking to be in a position where they can, reach your level in the next, in the next 10-15 years?
Okay. Sure. So I'm going to again, come to two aspects in this, right? One is how do you build your own self, right? And then the second is tag skill sets to those. So let's focus on the first point, building your own self, right? Uh, this is my personal view, and a lot of my team members and my extended management, they know that I talk about this a lot. Do things that are in your control. Right? That's the primary thing, right? It doesn't matter whether person A who is doing engineering and another person who's already passed out engineering is working in a global MNC or doing that person's own startup or something. But you need to focus only on what's in your control. What is that I can do today? What is that I can do right now? And what within that is within my control. Can I control the outcome of my teacher's behavior towards me? The answer is no. Can I control my own behavior? The answer is yes. Can I focus on what I can do today, given let's say I've got an exam in 3 days? The answer is yes. Can I control that the sun sets a little late in the night and I get 26 hours or 48 hours in a day? The answer is no. So start focusing on what is in your control, right? And when we start to do that, which is being a little mindful about your own self, automatically pathways open up to kind of for you to take the next step. So that's my personal belief, right? Second thing here is we all get distracted with a lot of things, right? Um, if we again, I'm a little bit of a history guy. So if you again go back to 70, 80 years or 100 years back, the maximum amount of distraction that one person would have is if there's a chaos in the neighborhood. Um, 70, 80 years back, the maximum amount of distraction was a radio. Uh, 50 years back, the distraction was television and newspapers that used to start to float into the houses. Uh, Mobile phones started almost 30 years back in our hands, and today it's the age of applications. So we started to divide our attention across various things. Now, because of that, the focus is getting uh, dwindling. It's getting divided across so many other things. So focus at one thing at a time, right? Focus just purely. If you are playing, just focus at that particular game for that particular moment. If you are if you're reading a book, then just do that. If you are building, uh, or designing your own website, just focus on that. So it's just being in that moment, do things which are in your control. So these are the two fundamentals that I would like anybody, irrespective whether that person is in college today or someone tenured as me or probably lesser or more, whatever it may be. Just do these two things, you will get a grip on multiple things in your life. And now, answering to the question in terms of building skill sets, uh, don't read too much of Instagram or social media, because somebody will say, "Oh, engineering is out of it's old. Nobody's valuing engineering and all of that." I think a lot of people who build something in the industry today, they all are somewhat or the other, related to some education, whether it's engineering or BBA. So education is going to be the key, right? And then you upskill. Upskill does not mean that you get a certification. Upskill means you learn something and you apply. So that's it. That's a very simple two word: learn and apply, learn and apply. And if you fail, it's absolutely fine. Don't worry about what the world is missing. So I think these are some of the things that I cherish a lot. I carry on a day-to-day basis, and this is the same message for everybody. Focus on what's in your control, right? Just do things what's in your control. Focus only on one thing at a time, and learn and apply. Learn and apply. If you fail, come back, learn and apply. That's it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's great. That actually answered some of my own questions also. So thanks for, sharing that. Um, as we close this conversation, and please, if anyone is watching, all those who are watching, please, please feel free to send the questions, like I mentioned earlier, in the comments or to me or to our team, and we'll be happy to address those. My next question is, since you have been in the industry for so long, right? And I believe that, when it comes to hiring, when it comes to getting new team members, and what are the key things that you look for in a candidate beyond skill sets, or and what kind of key metrics are you looking at, and how can someone develop their maybe interpersonal skills, their skill sets, the way they communicate, like anything you want to share to be successful, as a candidate who is trying to enter banking.
Sure. Okay. So for all the candidates, right, I think whatever we spoke till now, that becomes the fundamental, right? Building skill sets, focusing at one thing at a time, do what's in your control. That those are things that I generally prefer in an individual. But if I'm hiring someone, clarity and articulation of thoughts, that's going to be a key. Like any candidate on a minimum side gets 30 minutes and a maximum, let's say, gets an hour of an interview round. And that's the first hurdle, right? And then it could be depending upon the role, the seniority and the complexity of the role. You may get into multiple rounds. So every round is a yes or a no. And therefore, being very specific uh, or answering specific to that particular question is going to be key. Preparing yourself for those meetings is going to be important. When I say preparing, and now with age of AI, one can literally upload the JD and upload the CV and ask the AI to become, let's say, an interviewer. The AI will also give you multiple questions. But preparation is the key, right? You can you can prepare well. Actually, it's also the other way around. Majority of the time, what's important is when you say something in an interview, and let's say if you get selected, you stick to it, right? There have been times where people say, "Hey, I know coding. Hey, I know I've done operational risk or I've done market risk." But when it comes to on the job, right, they say, "Yeah, I've studied, but I've not executed or I've not worked in it." So don't fake. Be what's real. Um, if you fail sometimes in certain things, do call out that people may want to know that what happens if or how you treat failure, how do you overcome it, and those are great examples to talk about in an interview. Apart from highlighting all the accolades and the rewards and the recognition that one gets, and last but not the least, don't end with an interview where you do not have questions for the person or the panel who are taking your interviews. It's important for you to also ask questions, and don't ask questions for the heck of it, right? Um, Again, use AI to see what could be good questions for the interviewer, for the panel, uh, you know, uh, that should be asked, and make it more relevant to your role. Uh, and sometimes it's also okay to ask out of context questions, as long as you are able to connect the dots in why you want to understand that particular picture.
Understood. That's great. That's really helpful. So, my last question, if we still have time, I know, we have been on the discussion for more than an hour, and I really thank you, for sparing this time and sharing your experience and knowledge. And I'm sure that this will benefit a wide range of, aspirants and professionals. So, my question is that suppose, someone is sitting in an interview. There must be reasons why they got selected for the interview, which
Sure.
means they might have certain credentials, they might have certain experiences. Once they are in the interview, do any of those things matter? For example, whether they graduated from an Ivy League, just talking globally, whether they have all CFA, FRM, CQF, or do you think that once you are in an interview, the way you perform and the depth of your conceptual understanding matters more than anything else? That's what I think. But from an industry's perspective, there might be certain requirements also. What's your your take on that?
So, see, some of these credentials do, help you raise eyebrows or, get filtered through thousands of applications. Sometimes, not always. Um, I think what's important is, at least I, as a hiring manager, I've never gone to see if a person is from which Ivy League or what MBA school. But definitely, when I see something like CFA or an FRM, and if I'm hiring for a role which requires, those kind of skill sets, if not skill sets may be a probably vaguely used word. But if I'm looking for someone who has market risk background today, as whether that person may have FRM, may not have FRM or CFA or no CFA, but has worked in the market risk environment, understands, let's say, what is a delta, or what's a DVO1, or other risk metrics, and is able to articulate that in a conversation, then that means that person has some sound knowledge. Now, again, as I said, as an interviewer, I need to decide in 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour whether I will go ahead with the candidate for hiring or for the next round or whatever. So sometimes it's not just one answer. There are series of questions that help the interviewer to take a decision. And quite often it also depends upon how the person is able to answer the question in a more structured manner, than to kind of give multiple stories around the that particular question. Last but not the least, I think the other key aspect is, when these interviews also happen, if the answer to the question is also based on factual information, that would help a lot, because sometimes some of the responses are hypothetical, which actually then don't help to kind of get a conversion. So that's what I think about it.
Understood. Thank you so much. So my final question to you is, and this will be really, really exciting for everyone to hear. Like, what drives you, to go to work every day? What excites you the most about your current role? We would
Yeah,
all really like to hear about that.
yeah. I think every day when I go to work, I think a couple of things that I look forward for is actually to have a good day, right? Irrespective of what happens, like I I want to have a whole day in the 24 hours to end up on a positive note. So that includes family time, it includes my commute, it includes my work. So that's the again fundamental for me. And therefore, when I go to work, I look at, okay, what is it I can do today? What is pending for me, and how add more value to my own self. My one of my belief is that I can't add value to my role or to the team or the function unless and until I add value to my own self. So I start looking for those answers in the day, and then I kind of move forward. So that's something that excites me. But to be very honest, you know most of us actually do work only to kind of bring food on the table, or have a better life for family. So that's the source of that energy, that which is family, and then uh, work is just a medium to kind of move forward.
Okay, thank you so much. This was a really great discussion, and this was a great start of Saturday for me. It really, helped me understand a lot of things about the industry as well, and I really look forward to sharing this with the audience. And we can close it here. Any last message you have for the younger generation? Please feel free to share, and then we'll close this.
Yeah, I think last message is again a summary of what we spoke. Do things which are in your control. Increase your span of focus and learn, relearn. That's it. I think these are the three things that I would want to close again on.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you everyone for watching this episode of Finance Unplugged. Stay tuned for more. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them across. You have our emails, phone numbers, comments, and everything else. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's we end it over here. Now it's already recorded. You should have the unlisted link on the YouTube in your DM shortly. My team will be working on this after we close this. There will be a thumbnail with your picture on it. We have your picture from LinkedIn, so we'll show you the design also,
Sure.
and then we'll share it in the community on LinkedIn. And hopefully this will spark some good conversations. If there are any other questions from people, we'll send them across to you. And yeah, any questions for me that you have about Riskin or anything else, I'm happy to answer as well.
No, I think I'm good. This was a good conversation, Ripul. Thank you for putting it together, and thank you for your team to scheduling and I think the post production work and also good stuff. Thank you once again, and all the best for your skin.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, have a great day. Bye.